session of the Talmud on women. We're going to organize it by subject matter. And the criteria would be to find phrases about women either in title or in the first few lines. And I'm trying to find something a little bit more light. A lot of this is about disease and sin and preparing for those. This may be interesting because there is a lot of controversy when it comes to Eli. Eli's sons were accused of taking advantage of the women who showed up for service. This is one of the points of separation between the Samaritan Jews and the Israelite Jews. Samaritans, whether they're still considered Jews, especially according to mainstream Orthodox Judaism, is quite disputed. But let's carry on. The two sons of Eli, a superficial reading of the text of 1 Shmuel, stating that Eli's sons lay with the women that did service at the entrance of the tent of meeting. This is still in Shiloh. They convey the impression that they committed sinful acts. Rav Shmuel ben Nachmani said in Rav Yonatan's name, whoever says that the sons of Eli sinned is making a mistake, for it says, Chayfni and Pinchas, the two sons of Eli, were priests of God there. He agrees with Rav, who says that Pinchas, the son of Eli, never sinned. Now, since in the verse Chafni is equated with Pinchas, we can say just as Pinchas did not sin, so Chafni did not sin either. Gemara asks, well, if so, how do you explain the passage? How they, the sons of Eli, committed adultery with the women? Gemara answers, because they delayed their burnt offerings, so that the women did not return home to their husbands until they were certain that their offerings had been sacrificed. Torah considers it as if they had violated the women. Now we have this is one of many discrepancies between the plain meaning of the text and the actual meaning, or the meaning that is understood within tradition. The other discrepancy would be eye for an eye. Eye for an eye does not mean poking the other person's eye out. It means getting the monetary compensation that's fitting for the damaged eye. And going into the sources here, after giving birth, the woman completed a purification, after which she brought the offering of 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. So after each menstrual cycle, the women would bring burnt offerings. Because they were slow, it is as if they committed adultery with the women. The Gemara elaborates, we learned before that Rav said, Pinchas, the son of Eli, did not sin, for it says, Achia ben Achituf, the brother of Yechaved, who was the son of Pinchas, the son of Eli, the priest of God. Now, is it possible that Pinchas committed the grave sin of adultery, and Scripture would trace his grandson Achia's lineage to him? Look, it says God will have a person who does this. No descendants dwelling in the tents of Jacob, presenting offerings to the Lord of hosts. It's as if a person commits adultery is removed from the dwellings in the tents of Jacob. Gemara now expounds this verse. If this adulterous person is Israel, not a Kohen, he will not have a teacher who is sharp. So this is talking about an adulterous person. And if he is in Israel, then his teacher will not be sharp. He will not have a descendant who will be able to answer among the students. These are all playing with the words of adultery. Era and Oina are words related to immorality. If he is a Kohen, he will not have a son who will bring an offering in the Beis Hamikdash. So how could Pinchas have committed these sins and have grandson Achia, who was a respectable Kohen? We must conclude, therefore, that Pinchas did not sin. So this is the argument that if he is a Kohen, he will not have a son who will bring an offering. These are some of the divine punishments prescribed in the Torah. And so, as consistent with this principle, it would be unlikely that Pinchas had sons who still offered sacrifices in the Torah, in the tabernacle, if they had indeed committed these sometimes capital sins. And so this is one argument. Gemara asks, but it says how they lay with women. The Gemara answers, Ishkevon is written without a vav and can be read Ishkevon, which translates, he lay only chofni. But it says, Eli said, don't, my sons, it is no favorable report I hear, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, "We should read this not as Banai, my sons, but as Beni, my son, in the singular, meaning only the son Chafni." Gemara asked, but it says, Mavirim, you plural are causing the Jewish people to transgress, which is an indication that Pinchas also sinned. So Rav Huna, then Rav Yeshua, it is written, Maviram, he causes them to transgress. Only Chafni, not Pinchas, sinned. Gemara asked, but it says, now Eli's sons were scoundrels. Gemara answers, because Pinchas should have admonished his brother Chafni for his sins and did not. The Torah considers it as if he too had sins. This contradicts Rav Shmuel bar Ben Nachmani's opinion, which said above that both brothers did not sin. So the argument continues. Shmuel's son, Rabbi Shimon Shmuel bar Nachmani, Rabbi Shmuel the son of Nachmani, said in Rabbi Yonatan's name, whoever says that the sons of the prophet Shmuel sinned by taking bribes and distorting justice is making a mistake. Or says when Shmuel grew old, his sons did not follow in his ways. It is true that they did not follow in his saintly ways, but they did not sin either. Gemara asks, if so, how do you explain the passage? They were bent on gain, they accepted bribes, and they subverted justice. Gemara answers, that means that they did not act like their father. For the righteous Shmuel used to travel to all the places in Eretz Israel and judge the people in their town. As it says, each year he made the rounds of Bethel, Gilgal, and Mitzpah, and acted as judge over Israel. But his sons did not do that. They stayed in their own city and made people who had lawsuits come to them in order to increase the fees of their clerks and court secretaries. In other words, they were not corrupt, but they did establish an expensive bureaucracy. The evaluation of the character of Shmuel's sons hinges on the following controversy between two Tanaim. It says, they were bent on gain. Meir says, they were Levites, and they brazenly demanded their portion of the tithes that go to the Levites. Usually, the Levi waits until Israel gives him the tithe, because the Israel has the option to give it to any Levi he chooses. But the sons of Shmuel took unfair advantage of their position to demand the tithes outright. This is not considered taking bribe or subverting justice. Rabbi Yehuda said they forced people to sell their merchandise for them and give them the profits, and that is akin to taking bribes and distortion of justice. So this is one of many places where the Torah uses rather hyperbolic or even exaggerated condemnations. Sometimes it could be praise for people who are featured in the main text of the Torah. This is because that they are on a much higher level, such as the assumption within Orthodox Judaism that they're on a higher level. Because they're on a higher level, they're judged more harshly. Just a general spiritual principle. Because if these people had a court case, the sons of Shmuel would favor them. Rabbi Akiva said they took a greater portion of the tithes that was coming to them. But that is not regarded as taking bribes. Rabbi Yosef said they took their gifts of tithes by force, depriving the Israel of his option to give the tithe to whomever he chooses. But this was not considered as taking bribes or subverting justice. So this discussion seems to continue for quite a while. I don't know if it ends there, but as far as the Talmud's accounting of it, it seems to be satisfied with it. Or maybe not, maybe it doesn't speak anything of satisfaction. The magnificence of Ruth. Ruth, a famous convert, whose descendants included King David. When Naomi sent Ruth to the threshing floor to meet Boaz, in the hope that Boaz would marry her, Naomi said, wash yourself, anoint yourself with oil, and put on your clothing. Reb Lezer said this refers to the Sabbath clothes. Of course, she was wearing clothes. Then what kind of clothing would Naomi have meant? Obviously, she had to mean Sabbath clothing. So, apparently this putting on clothing, this is obviously, it seems to be quite an assumed premise, or obviously assumed premise, that she was wearing Sabbath clothes. But it's not just because it's obvious, but because putting on clothing is a redundancy unless we consider the possibility that they refer to something particular. And there may be no other legally significant clothing in the Jewish tradition. There are no special funeral garb according to legal criteria, as far as I know. There are no stipulations of putting on special garments for leaders. The only times where the Torah prescribes by law to put on special clothing is for the Sabbath. The leader of leaders, the King of Kings, which is the God. And so that makes sense. Pursuing this theme, the Gemara quotes the verse, "Instruct a wise man, he will grow wiser. He will improve on what you told him." Elazar said, this refers to Ruth the Moabitess and the prophet Samuel of Ramah. As for Ruth, although Naomi said to her, "Wash yourself, anoint yourself with oil, and put on your clothing, and then go down to the threshing floor." When Ruth actually did it, it says, first, she went down to the threshing floor, and only then. She did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her, and washed and dressed herself. She realized that people would become suspicious if they saw a young woman all dressed up going to the threshing floor late at night. So she waited until she got there to change. As for Shmuel, how do we see that he reacted wisely to what someone told him? Young Shmuel, who grew up in Eli's house, came to Eli a few times during the night and said, "I heard you calling me." Eli understood that it was God who was calling Samuel. Although Eli said to him, "Go back to sleep. If you're called again, say, 'Speak, God, because your servant is listening.'" So Eli was born of a woman who was barren for a very long time. And the woman pledged the life of the child, should he be born, to Shmuel, to be a trainee of the temple, or maybe a trainee prophet. And so here is one of the first incidences of Eli hearing the prophetic voice. Although Eli said to him, "Go back to sleep. If you're called again, say, 'Speak, God, because your servant is listening.'" When it actually happened, it says, God came and stood over Samuel, and he called as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel answered, "Speak, for your servant is listening." But he did not say, "Speak, God." He did not have the audacity to presume that God was speaking to him. So Samuel, the child of the barren woman, I hope I didn't mix that up. This account is his first time hearing God's voice. And he had a level of humility that led him away from presuming that God would talk to him. It seems to be a prerequisite for prophecy, or maybe in his case alone, maybe it can be generalized. The Gemara now returns to the subject of Ruth. It says, "Off she went. She came and gleaned in a field." Rabbi Lezer says this means that she went from field to field until she found other reapers in the field who were decent people, and she followed them in order to pick leftover stalks in the field. Boaz said to the servant who was in charge of the reapers, "Who is this girl?" The Gemara asks, is it proper for a tzaddik, a very righteous person like Boaz, to inquire about a girl? Why are you asking about a girl? This is the implication. So Rabbi Lezer, he inquired because he detected an act of wisdom in her conduct. If 2 stalks fell down and she picked them up, but she saw 3 stalks falling down, she would not pick them up. She was acting in keeping the law of leket, the law of the stalks that have fallen, which states that if only 1 or 2 stalks fall from the farmer's hand, he may not pick them up, but must leave them for the poor. If 3 or more stalks fall, he may take them. This is a law that applies to the farmers in Israel, that if, when they are harvesting, they dropped less than 3 stalks, then he cannot pick them up. Those stalks will be left for the poor, who later has to come and collect. In the Brisa we learned, Boaz inquired because he saw modesty in Ruth. Leftover stalks that were still standing in the field, she picked while she was standing. The stalks that had fallen down, she would squat down to pick up instead of bending over. So this is modesty. When a woman doesn't squat, she exposes places that would be considered immodest. So she carried herself with wisdom, with an understanding of the Torah's requirements. Boaz said to Ruth, "Don't go to glean in another field. Stay here, close to my girls." The Gemara asks, is it proper for Boaz to seek closeness to women? So Rabbi Lezer, Boaz knew that this was Ruth and knew her history. Now, when he saw that Orpah Orpah, Ruth's sister-in-law, kissed her mother-in-law Naomi goodbye and left her, but Ruth stayed close to Naomi even though she faced a life of poverty. He recognized Ruth's outstanding qualities, therefore Boaz said it is permitted to attach oneself to such a person. So this is Boaz being a very Saturnite, a discriminating and discerning judge, because cleaving to women can be problematic, but here he assessed his righteousness and deemed her fitting because she displayed a trust, a faith, or discernment that she should become part of the Jewish people. When it was time to eat, Boaz said to her, "Come over here, Halayim." Abelazar said, by using the word Halayim, he gave her a prophetically inspired hymn, telling her in effect, "The royal house of David will descend from you." Ruth was the great-grandmother of David. In the present verse, Boaz used the word Halom in reference to Ruth. And Halom is used here also in reference to David, for it says, "Then King David came and sat before God. And he said, What am I, O Lord God, and what is my family that you have brought me Halom to this point?" Halom refers to both Ruth and David. Boaz told Ruth, "Dip your bread into vinegar," said Rabbi Lazar. This shows us that vinegar is helpful to bring relief from the heat. This was harvest time in the middle of the summer, and Boaz advised her to use vinegar. Shmuel bar Nachmani said, by speaking of vinegar, he gave her prophetically inspired hint, telling her in effect, "An offspring will descend from you, whose deeds will be as harsh as vinegar." And who was that? That was Manasseh, king of Judah, the most corrupt of all the kings of Yehuda. So she sat down beside the reapers, said Eliezer. She sat down on one side of the reapers, and Boaz sat on the other side, and so that the reapers separated him from Ruth. But she did not sit among them. This was a prophetic indication to her that the monarchy of David would become split. David's descendants will rule over Judah and Benjamin. The other 10 tribes will break off and form the kingdom of Israel. This was symbolized by the reapers who separated her from Boaz. He, Boaz, handed her roasted grain, and she ate. She was satisfied and had some left over. Said Rabbi Lazar, she ate. This refers to the prosperity in the time of David. She was satisfied. This refers to the prosperity in the time of Solomon. And she had some left over. This refers to the prosperity in the days of Hezekiah. Others say she ate refers to the prosperity in the days of David and Solomon. So all these premonitions of things to come relate to her sensation after eating, her sensations of physical satisfaction and having leftovers and eating. And she had some left over, first the prosperity in the days of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the compiler of the Mishnah, known as Rabbeinu HaKodesh, who was very wealthy. For we learn the house of Stuart, who took care of Rebbe's houses, horses and mules, were wealthier than King Shfor of Persia. So they were incredibly wealthy at the time. And this Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, was likely a descendant of King David, along with the rest of these people. In the Brisa we learn Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is the leader. Hanassi means the leader. In the Brisa we learn she ate, presages that you'll eat in this world. She was satisfied, presages that you'll be satisfied in the days of Mashiach, the days of redemption, the days of the Messiah. And she had some left over is a pre-indication that in the ultimate future, even then you'll have something left over in the spiritual prosperity. Perhaps there will be a time of scarcity, but these merits will hold the people in good stead. Oh, here's another one. Common phrase relating to not speaking excessively with women. A very wise counsel. Outwitted by a woman, a girl, and a boy. Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananiah said, "In all my life, no one ever outsmarted me except for a woman, a little boy and a little girl." What was the episode with the woman? I was once staying with a hostess who served me beans. On the first day I ate all of them and left nothing. On the second day too, I left nothing. However, on the third day she put too much salt on them, and as soon as I tasted it, I stopped and did not touch it. Rabbi, she asked me, Why aren't you eating? I have already eaten, I reply. Then why didn't you abstain from eating the bread at the beginning of the meal? Rabbi, she continued, could it be that you're not eating today to make up for the fact that you did not leave anything from your dish yesterday and the day before? So she is preventing her from finishing her dishes. I believe this is one of the legal axioms of the Torah, that a person should not finish everything on their plate. Perhaps that's a sign of gluttony. For having the sages said that the waiter who dishes out the food should not leave any food in the pot for himself, but the guest should leave something on the plate. Perhaps for the waiter, this was the woman's veiled reproach for the failure to leave her a tip on the two previous days. What was the incident with the little girl? Once I was on a trip, and when I noticed a path running across the field, I took that path. Suddenly, a little girl called out, Rabbi, isn't this a field? Who gave you the right to go through someone else's field? I replied, isn't this a trodden path? The little girl shot back, how do you think it became a trodden path? It is robbers like you that made it a trodden path. So the girl gave him much needed and correct rebuke. What was the story with the little boy? I was once on a trip when I saw a young boy sitting at a crossroad. I asked him, son, what road do I take to go to the city? He replied, this road is long but short, and this road is short but long. So I took the short road. When I came close to the city, I discovered that it was surrounded by gardens and orchards, so that I could not enter. This is the short road. And I turned back, and when he reached the boy, I said, son, didn't you tell me that this road was the short one? Rabbi, but didn't I also tell you that it was long? He retorted. I kissed him on his head and said, to him, fortunate are you, Israel. All of you are wise, both young and old. Rabbi Yossi al-Galili was once on the road when he met Beruria, the mayor's wife, a very wise and pious woman. He asked her, by what road shouldn't we travel to Lydda? She replied, Galilean fool that you are. Didn't the sages say, do not talk excessively with women? You should have asked how to Lyd. So he should have used a much more abbreviated question with the woman. This is one among many examples why it's considered quite treacherous to speak to women within the Jewish tradition. Well, this might be an interesting one. Interesting, albeit long. But let's delve into it because it may be important. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, a person should not utter coarse language. The Torah uses 8 letters more than necessary in an effort to avoid using an uncouth term. For it says, God said to Noah, take 7 pairs of every clean animal and of every animal that is not clean. By using the phrase that is not clean instead of the single word tamea, unclean, the Torah added 8 Hebrew letters. But Papa says 9 extra letters were used, for it says, if man is not clean because of a nocturnal emission. Here the term tame, unclean, would have 9 letters. Rabina said 10 extra letters were used because tachar, clean, is written with a vav. Rav Achab or Yaakov said 16 letters could have been saved by using the word tame, for it says it is accidental, referring to the nocturnal emission. Saul thought, he is not clean, surely he is not clean. So the Torah goes through lengths, subverting its usual path of parsimony, of using short words or short phraseologies, concise phraseologies, in order to prevent saying something bad. So this, once again, biases a person towards speaking good, and that is considered meritorious. In the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, it was taught a person should always express himself in refined language. For regarding a zav, a man who has a discharge from his organ, the Torah speaks in terms of mirka, riding, while concerning a woman who has the same condition, the term moishab, sitting, is used. Although the same law applies to both men and women, but it is not refined to use for women the term mirka, riding, which suggests spreading the legs apart. Again, another emphasis in the Torah for modesty. Furthermore, it says you should choose discreet language, and also says, my lips utter insight in purity. Gemara asks, why do you cite a second verse? What novel thought does it contribute? Gemara replies, in case you will say that you must use refined language only when discussing Torah laws, because it is the word of God, but not when it comes to rabbinical law. Then come and listen to the following proof. For it also says you should choose discreet language. Now in case you still object and say that this applies only when discussing rabbinical law, but when it comes to secular matters, you do not need to use refined language. And come and listen to the following proof. who also says, "My lips utter insight and purity." So even for secular knowledge, a person should utter insights and purity. We learn above that the term riding is not used in connection with women because it has an immodest connotation. Gemara asks, is riding not used in connection with women? What about Rebecca set off with her girls, and they rose on the camels? The Gemara answers, there it was normal for her to straddle the camel because she was afraid to fall off its high back. What about Moses took his wife and sons and made them ride on a donkey which does not have a high back? There the term riding is used because it was normal for sons to ride. But what about Abigail was riding on a donkey? There it was normal for her to ride a donkey because she was afraid of the night. Or if you prefer, say that she was not afraid of the night, but she was afraid of David, that he would kill the entire household of her husband, Nabal. Or if you prefer, say she was not afraid of David, but she was afraid of the mountain. As it says, she came down a trail on the mountain.